Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. And welcome to video number 95 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. All right, it's a new day. Got some sleep. Feel a lot better. I'm not wore out. We're going to wrap this edge up and proceed to scrape the rest of this stone to do the edges. After we do this, the other end, because I put a line on it, like I did here, these ends are pretty straight. They're pretty nice. So they're not going to take much of a tip, and they'll be great. But I got to do the long edges and get the long edges. I'll tip them, bevel them probably with a brick, and I'll do it carefully so I can get rid of as much of the shagginess as possible. I'll try to use something a little bit wider as opposed to a small piece that'll dig into the valleys, just like same concept as what we're doing here, trying to work off the high points and leave the lows, and so then we've got a nice flat surface. We'll get the front and the back bricked into shape. At the end, we'll just brick this enough to break this edge so there's not individual crystals. When you brick it, really all you need to do when you bevel these edges is you don't want to take a lot off, because we worked hard to make these look nice. You can see in the light, you can see right in here where this is still a little bit tall. I've still got a little bit of material left that I've got to clean off as I axe it. And so this is going to be a lot of just careful, fine axing. I also want to try to, you can see a little bit of the lines, a little bit of undulation here. And so what I'll end up doing is I'll probably end up doing more of a wash diagonal both ways to really try to get rid of any of these vertical lines that I can. So then when I go through and do I probably won't worry about axing it like this as much. I'll probably get my 45, and then my final like this as I go over the whole thing. Something I'll point out about when I was doing this corner I didn't mention before. I cut this corner all the way out and left the material on here when I was cutting that off and showing you tipping the chisel and using the trailing edge to cut the edge. You got to be careful when you're doing that not to go past the plane of the front of this scotia, so that if you put a straight edge on here all the way across, this should be a high spot and this should be a high spot, so that you got material to remove. When you still got, half an inch, I had some of this on a couple of these corners that I had around an inch of material that I had to clean off. It's real easy when you're doing that to dig, and you'll have a low spot in here, but you're still good out on the end. Then you cut the end off, and all of a sudden it's low. That's not what you want to do. So just go careful, go slow, and I'll be in and out with this to show you what I can, and hopefully this video we can get this stone completely wrapped up, and it'll just be nice. So let's cut some stone. it's really important when you start getting into the final critical work. Turn this a little bit, like this edge, okay? This edge will finish the top for me, basically. Then we've just got to brick it. You got to be really careful. Some of y'all may be art people, or you may like to write and use a pen, and this is when you start getting into the zone, you know. And I hate to say that because it sounds goofy, but this is when you really have to clear your head. You can't be thinking about, you got to make enough money for car insurance next week, or your spouse, or your kid, or your whatever. You really got to be able to let go. And a lot of times, I know from personal experience, I like to write and draw and stuff. And when I really start concentrating, I can squeeze that pencil or that pen when I'm trying to be really careful. I'll squeeze it so hard that it fatigues my hand, and I end up getting a cramp. This is why I was showing you about holding the tools with just a couple fingers and just manipulating your fingertips. Not squeezing it excessively hard, just enough to control it confidently. This is where you'll screw up, okay? You've got to be able to relax. You've got to be able to focus. You've got to be able to be in control. Super sharp tools. You're going to be going through tools and stones on your grinder just like crazy, because you're just wanting to be able to perfectly shave just tiny amounts of dust off of here. And in order to get that good fit, where it's tight at the bottom and it meets the degrees all the way up. So slow down and be careful and relax. And that's the hard thing, is to say you've got to really be focused and really pay attention. And at the same time, you got to be totally relaxed and just into it. When I complain about the gloves and stuff like that, one of the biggest reasons, see, I wore gloves during my apprenticeship. I wore jersey gloves, just cotton gloves, and we cut all the fingertips off, okay? And then you wrap it to protect your knuckles. Now, you may end up with some calcium in your knuckles. It's not going to kill your hands working on the stone. If you're rubbing against this all day long, yeah, they'll get raw and then they'll heal up and they'll be fine. But doing this, I finally gave up. Sometimes I wear gloves, but most of the time I don't. Depends on the stone. Some stone will really cut you up and you really need to wear gloves. But this nice Georgia and berry granite, they don't do that. But relax. Sharp tools, let the tools do the work. Don't stress. And because the goal is, I'm going to cut this morning, then I can spend the rest of the day, hopefully before my light's ruined, and I can really read the stone with the raking light, and I can start really cutting. Just take your time and make it right. It's better off, we spent, I don't know how many hours getting to this point. If it takes me an extra hour to do something I should be able to do in 25 minutes, and it takes me an hour instead, that's not going to ruin my life, okay? Because I don't want to have to rework all of this, okay? Just be careful. Couple more little details. I had a little crumble right here in the middle. Probably hit it, with a 9-point or 16-point, and weakened the crystals just a little bit, and they crumbled out. It looked like a 9-point stone, but it wasn't deep enough. So instead of, and this is the middle center of this side. Instead of going really aggressive and washing it out, I did sort of like what I tell you not to do when you go through a hole and you'll dig it out. I just went along over it very lightly, just enough to break the edges of the crystals and to stun them a little bit, because whenever the stone breaks, it's going to have a different value than when it's cut. It's going to be lighter colored when you actually cut it with a chisel. It's like leaving a stun mark or a point mark on the rock pick. And so by just going over that and softening the edges of those crystals a little bit, that whitens it up a lot and helps it camouflage. because that's not productive to try to dig it out. I'm also getting to the center, okay? Now, I told you this is supposed to blend from right to left, the whole length. If I carry this and I continue to travel over here to this other end where I did my initial register, if that goes over there and for some reason I'm a little bit deep, I'm going to have a deep witness out here on the corner that's going to be hard to get rid of. So it's smarter when you're doing something like this where you have it where you can't carry it off the end. Like when we did the sides, we didn't finish the sides yet. We left this ends a little bit tall until we did the corners. Now that we've got this corner established, it makes more sense, now that I'm near the middle, to go over here and work my way back towards the middle. So if I have a discrepancy, remember we talked about wanting to leave the middle a little bit crowned, just a little bit crowned. It doesn't have much, just a tiny bit. We got a pretty good fit over here. This is all right on the money, looks great. I'd be better off to carry this in from this end and then have a spot in here where I can sort of blend it to make it all disappear so it's a nice edge. A nice scotia, nice face. Something I didn't mention about the pattern. Okay, it's okay to check with the pattern, but remember, the pattern has this lower lip, and when you put it in, you want that to hit, and you want the top to hit. Now, if you go and you cut the top until the bottom registers, and the bottom, this line, isn't perfectly straight because it was cut by a man, cut it pretty good, but it isn't perfectly straight. I can correct that up here by cutting this line straight and letting this be wherever it is, because this is all chaos down here, all this rock pitch. You're not going to see a discrepancy in this line as quickly as you will in this polished line. So we're better off to make any correction that's needed up top here. You can check with the pattern to get it close, but we want this line to be visually perfect as we can make it, so that it will camouflage any other discrepancies. We want this panel to be smooth all the way across, even if we've got little digs, or if for some reason we have to deal with a little bit of in and out. We want this to look great. We want this to be as perfectly straight as possible, because that's easy to do. And so you can check with your pattern, but just remember, if you register it and you get the tight fit at the bottom, however straight this bottom is going to dictate how straight the top is. Okay, so use your judgment. Don't be too anal and say I have to do it this way. Use your judgment to get the best result. By working each end in, just putting a nice taper on this end, and then working from here and just bringing the whole thing together all at once. I shouldn't have a transition line where I've already cleared it up where I'd stop. I had a transition line here and a transition line over here. I clean those up, and now I'm trying to taper it. Remember when we took the strips off, we left one side tapered so we cleared off the piece in the middle. It was between where we'd work and we were cutting a new line and we had a strip. We left this side a little bit high. We're doing the same idea here so that I don't have a line to clean up, and then I can just have this whole area will just be humped a little bit, but it'll be a smooth hump. And I can just take and axe it right down and tighten it up, make it really great. Because right here's on the money, and over here's right on the money too. And I just got it just crowned a little more rough here, and then this is tall. Right in here I can see that it's tall. I'll just continue to scrape it, mainly with my round tools on a bias, back and forth. Then I'll clean everything off with a straight tool, big scraper. Just keep cutting, keep your tools sharp. That's it. All right, that edge is done. Got all 4 sides. Left end looking good. Now it's time to do some critical thinking. We're gonna have to use our light, get our gear around to rub this, to brick it. That edge looks pretty great. It's still, if I tip it, the center's still a little bit taller than the very ends, because the ends have got a little bit of bevel. The center doesn't. So I'll bevel that to where it looks great. Really close, really close. And we'll just gently rub these corners, just enough to whiten them up. Because when you can feel the individual crystals really easily, they're apt to fail slowly. And what you'll find in the future is that these little cracks, remember I said about pushing on this and having a rift going up and down and having a crack, they'll initiate a crack just from freeze-thaw cycles, and the crack will go down into this edge, and it'll go down, it'll go down a little ways, and it'll just widen in, and then it'll just break off, and you'll have a piece that comes out like that. And that's common to see in old miters like this. So what we want to do is we want to rub this to try to arrest any little fractures that are in that edge, so that they can't get water in them, freeze thaw, freeze thaw, freeze thaw, and grow that crack that might be there. It'll just help them be more durable for a longer length of time. What happens when it's really bad is you'll get one down here in the corner and you'll lose the whole corner, and it'll just fall right off. And that's what I was talking about when I said we got to be careful on the corners, not to put too much energy into them, because we don't want to fracture anything around this corner. We want to leave it really sound. So we're going to shave it off with really small tools to be really careful, that are super sharp. Get it off. Now I could have used a bigger hand machine on this and gone faster, but I don't want to impart any more energy into the stone than we have to. And a 1-inch machine would have removed stone faster, but it would have tended to create tiny fractures that we didn't want. So I'm gonna resort this a little bit. I'm gonna break for lunch, and then we'll get into this. We've got to go through and straighten the edges down, and then we'll play with the light. Now, when I'm axing a stone like this, especially because I'm up by the front of the studio, so I don't have great control over my light, it's probably going to take me a little longer than I normally would spend, because I've got to make sure that my light isn't wrecking me, because this front is so white I can't read it. I can see along this bottom edge and how it curves up to where there's a couple spots I'd like to even out. But you got to clean the stone all off, because a lot of that I'm seeing that's uneven is just gravel that's on there, a little fine gravel. So we'll get these. I'll tip the 2 edges. I'll probably tip the 2 ends first to brick them and get them really nice, and we'll start scraping them. We'll have to brick the front and back as well. We got to go around this top edge, basically this top inch, and axe it really careful. We'll probably use the big curve scraper on a bias both ways, and we'll finish it up with this. Now, I said before, it isn't critical that the pattern fits perfectly everywhere. It should fit as well as you can possibly make it at the very end. But what we're going to do is, there's a little bit on this bottom, especially out here on the edges, where I've got to lower the top of this just a little bit. And as I scrape that, and I'll narrow that up and make it look better. But we've got to make this whole scotia look even all the way across the stone. At this point, now we don't have any big failures. That's the most critical part, versus putting the pattern on it and making sure the pattern is absolutely perfect. We want to make sure the stone looks perfect, because nobody's going to take the pattern out to the cemetery and check the stone, okay? I'll be right back after lunch. All right, studying my light, studying my stone and all the little things. What I'm going to do in the length of this video, I'm going to work on this bottom edge, getting rid of this little bit of lip that it's got. It's got to go down just a tiny bit on this edge, because this edge is still a little bit tall, you can see it. So I'm going to work on lowering that edge carefully while I axe it, because I've got good control over this light, and try to get the high spots knocked down on this, and just worry about doing my crosshatch on this whole thing. Not digging everywhere, but trying to focus on what looks like high spots based upon my light. It's a little overcast today. The light's not horrible, but it still has spells when it's really bright. We're supposed to get rain a lot tomorrow. And so that should really knock the light down and give me a lot better control. And so hopefully I can spend time with that light as well to really work on the other side. Because basically I can work on this side, have good control, and work on the back side and have good control of my light. And then I'll spin the stone around, and I can do the same with the other two. And as I get wrapped up, I'll finish the top edge, probably do that last and do the scraping. This is when you get into a rhythm, and you get into where you're feeling good and you're comfortable, and you really got to have, like I said, you got to clear your mind, you got to relax, you got to be completely tuned in and on top of it, but you got to be completely chilled out and just not getting distracted, because this is when stuff really goes wrong. So I'm going to work on getting this evened up to make this bottom edge look really great, because I got a couple places where, you know, the scotia's really good, and then I got a couple places where the scotia's got a little bit of a too square of a transition. And I want to make sure I pull my ends down so the ends look good and get all this straightened up. So everything's great. There's going to be some scraping. This edge is lowered, I'll tip it with the bush chisel as I need to keep it strong. Okay, I don't want this to be too fragile to have it break. I've mentioned this before. I want to mention it here. When you're doing this kind of work, real sensitive, you got to be really careful, because valve bumps against the stone. You give it a tug and it bumps, and all of a sudden that machine takes off and you wreck stuff. So if your valve isn't hanging above your tool when you're working like it normally should be, because I'm reaching so far, I've got the hose fed out so it's down below. Got to be really careful not to bump it on my knee, or bump it on my bench, or catch it on something and give it a quick tug, just instinctively, and all of a sudden you've got wreckage. You've been warned. When you start axing work like this, when I say I'm going to do a 45 one way, you know, like this, and a 45 the other way, I mean a 45. I don't mean a 53, I don't mean a 60, I don't mean a 12, I mean a 45. You want to have your lines organized so you've got entire wash of parallel lines. And I don't mean crooked, jumbled, scribbled lines. I mean they should all be parallel. And then when you turn it, they should all be parallel and perpendicular. And then they should all be straight, and they should bisect those those other two angles, those other two lines, okay? You want it to be true parallel at 90 degrees and 45. Those are the only lines you want on there. Because what's going to happen is, because there's so many, there's more tool marks than you can count. It's like looking at sand. There's so much there that you can't see it. When you look at the sand, the things that stand out are the little pieces on the beach that aren't the same size as the sand. The rest of it looks all homogeneous. It just looks normal, okay? If you have, say we're going 45, but we've got some lines that aren't quite, they're not straight up and down, and they're not diagonal, and they're just kind of bent, or that they bend. When we do our wash, if there's our final axing, if there's any remnants of those crooked or lines that aren't parallel or that aren't at the same angle to everything else, they will stand out as unique, and your eye will see them, and they will create visual noise, and it will create potentially roughness on your surface. By having the lines all go the same way, when you look at this and you see this, they just kind of disappear and blend away. It's like looking at the leaves on the trees. You understand the leaves on the trees. They make sense. When you look at the tree and there's a big black knob in the tree, you're trying to figure out if it's if it's an animal, or if it's a beehive, hornet's nest, if it's a gall on the tree, what it is, because it doesn't match. You're used to seeing things. Having all these lines line up, and all these lines line up, it helps all of them disappear. There's so many of them, your eyes see them and subconsciously dismisses them because they all make sense. But if they see one really deep crooked line or a bent line that's not like anything else, it'll jump out. Okay? Get good at axe and stuff. I'm going to use a big block because it's long. Now, if you just scrub it back and forth, you'll make a line down it, and that's no good. You can use a little grindstone. You can use whatever grades the stone. Use a green wheel. They're really soft. Just don't set it on your polish because it'll scratch your polish. Now I got to shave this edge. I can see with my rake and light how rough this is, and I got to just shave that. That's it. I can't rub these yet because I haven't finished cutting them from the other side. But I feel pretty good about that end. See, I don't have any big low spots. A couple of little bits right here. They need to clean up. Just take your red pencil, mark what shows, and then you can go back and fix it. All you gotta do is touch a little bit of this, and there won't be enough there for anybody to notice. So, I'll touch these up. We'll wrap this video up. It's long enough. We'll be back to do some more action. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculptor Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.